the more I can look at people in the eye and just see that I've made a difference, and then I get gratitude from them, and I feel like I matter in those moments. And I feel like that's the kind of abundance that I want.
Hey, it's Rocky. Welcome to Richer Soul. Today's guest is Michael Westover to chat about living a worthwhile life. Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day? To have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want? To be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Richer Soul, where we achieve our dreams and bring balance to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richersoul.com. While you're there, you can sign up for a monthly email where I share the best articles I read this month, let you know about upcoming episodes, and share a little wisdom. You can also listen to coaching calls under the Coaching Calls tab. I also share the most interesting articles I read every week on Facebook at facebook.com/Richer Soul. And there's also a Facebook group where you can ask questions and interact with other listeners. Today's quote comes from Alan Watts. The meaning of life is just to be alive. It's so plain and so obvious and so simple. And yet everybody rushes around in a great panic as if it were necessary to achieve something beyond themselves. When I came to realize how pointless most activities are and how much I forget about life, it makes me wonder why I spend so much time and energy worrying about them and running around after them. And just learn to say no and let go. Too many people chase success like I did, only to find out it's not what it's all cracked out to be. Our guest is another Wharton Business School graduate who also came to that realization. Wonder if it's a trend for the Ivies. Everything I see probably says yes. At the end of the day, we want to enjoy life and be happy. Certain things need to be attained for that to happen. Do you know the difference between purpose and meaning in life? That's our topic for today, and how they each play a role in your life. We also explore how happiness and spirituality fit into the picture. When you begin with the end in mind, it becomes easier to achieve your goals. The problems arise when you pick the wrong goals, as happens to too many people in life. Because like money, school doesn't teach you how to evaluate what you should really go after. Michael Westover is a writer, speaker, healthcare industry executive, and graduate of the Wharton School of Business at the University of Pennsylvania. His blog, Echoes of Meaning, is a collection of more than 30 articles about human connection and articles on family, business, religion, and self-improvement. Many of his pieces attempt to decodify ancient truths from new angles to make them applicable to modern life. What he's uncovered has made his life more meaningful, and he hopes he does the same for you. Let's meet Michael and learn from him. Welcome to Richer Soul, Michael Westover. It's great to have you join us today.
Rocky, it's great to be with you today, too.
And I'm excited to learn from you today. We always like to start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
I would say that school, at least the younger parts of my education, so high school, college, didn't teach me very much about money. But I did grow up in the Los Angeles area. My father's a CEO type, and I think I learned a lot from him. He was very good with money, started and sold many companies, and used to talk a lot about what worked and what didn't, and the relationships and the secrets of success.
Interesting. So was he intentional about teaching you about money, or were those just the conversations that kind of occurred?
I think he was just obsessed about businesses and starting businesses and changing the world. And he couldn't help but talk about those things around me. When I grew up, I feel like business was the evil institution that took my father away as a child. Like, he would leave and be gone for a couple of weeks at a time, and then come back and then be gone for another couple of weeks. So I always had this thing against business. Like, I didn't want to be a business person. And I feel like I kind of fought it until college.
You know, it's kind of funny that you look at life and say, I want to be successful so that I can give to my family, but the one thing they want is your time more than anything.
Absolutely. That's how I felt in my case. Then I was in college and was just drawn to the business topics, the business classes, marketing, accounting, finance, all of that. I mean, as soon as I started taking those classes, I really enjoyed them. I feel that I had something to offer there. And I don't know if it's my education or just the conversations I had with my father, but I couldn't help but go into business. And then when I'm in it, I just loved it.
Interesting. Now, did you say school didn't teach you about money?
I would say college didn't teach me about money. I would say Wharton did a pretty good job of like opening my eyes to money. If that was undergrad, I feel like it was pretty light. But in Wharton, I think it taught me a little bit about money, and also it taught me about work. In my undergrad, the library closed at midnight and everybody left. At Wharton, at 1 o'clock in the morning, I would get kicked out of study rooms. I mean, the amount that the people were willing to go through, I think it just opened my eyes to what people were willing to do to be successful in business, more than anything.
Interesting. So, I mean, they were grinding it out to make it, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And I don't think I appreciated how much work matters until I went to Wharton. And sure, it also opened my eyes to some of I remember taking a statistics class and just putting in the least amount possible and kind of scraping by with a B-. And then I went in for an internship and it was all statistics. And I thought, I need to think more statistically. I need to be able to do statistics to be successful in the real world, and read a lot on my own. And I feel like Wharton kind of opened my eyes to some of those topics that have been important in my career.
And how did they open your eyes to money?
The way it opened my eyes to money was that, Wharton is known as a finance school. And I think what it opened my eyes to was the relationship between volatility and risk and money. And it taught me that if I am willing to take risk, then it's much more likely that I'm going to be successful. The kind of hiding and trying to be amazing, but secretly amazing without taking any risk is not going to work. So I learned about leveraging, and I learned about, it was when I was going to school, it was during the Bernie Madoff scandal, and many folks who had gone to my school were kind of implicated in some of the financial issues that were going on at the time. And a few people from my school had gone to jail. And so I think there was a really interesting conversation around how much risk is too risky, and how can we do this in an ethical manner, in a way that doesn't ruin our lives and lives of those around us. We talked a lot about people who did it all for the money and nothing else, and were willing to cut corners to make it. And we also talked about folks who were willing to improve the lives of people so much that those people were willing to pay them for that service. And I think I didn't really understand that until I went to school.
That's interesting, because I think of, if they went to jail, it wasn't a risk they took. They broke the law. Whereas the risk part to me is taking a gamble. And you were always taught, right? You gotta take a risk to win big. But yet, when I look at one of the people who've won the biggest, which is Warren Buffett, Warren Buffett's attitude is, I don't take risks. Like, he's like, I'm looking for easy fences to jump over where I can make massive amounts of money. He's almost anti-risk, is in a sense, and maybe I'm reading that wrong.
I think that's one way to look at it. I mean, I would say that he's absolutely sticking his neck out, though, every time he makes a decision. And I know he's trying to limit that risk, but he's bold. I mean, he's definitely taking risks on companies and taking risks on people. And those risks are measured. I'm not saying that you should do things that are foolhardy. I'm saying that you should measure those risks against the potential return. And I think that humans are just naturally too risk averse. At least I was. I would take the most conservative investing strategy and the most conservative way that I would approach, should I start a business or should I write a book? And I would just go through down the expected corridor, and I'm just going to start low in the company and work my way up through it. And I feel that taking little risks was a better way to go about it. And honestly, when it comes to breaking the law, I've seen people around me, and we studied this in school, where it's not a huge difference between a gray area and black. Like sometimes you can do something where there is a new compliance thing with the government where everybody's trying to comply and be safe. And if you just go a little into the gray where it's still ethical, but it's not really certain if it's against the law, you can get into that space and get in a lot of trouble easily.
And it also depends on the situation, right? In other words, Bernie Madoff gets caught and they want to arrest a bunch of people. Usually they don't arrest the top guy. Usually they arrest all the people below him. So even if you're in that gray, so to speak, because they need to look good for political reasons, you can't fight the government. So was it worth it to go to Wharton?
I think that it was expensive. It was too expensive right off the bat. I think what I learned was invaluable, just of what humans are capable of doing. I feel like I'd never been around that caliber of individual, someone who was willing to sacrifice so much for their education and so much for their career. I think I learned a lot about myself, about what I was willing to do too. I saw people thinking, I'm going to work in management consulting and work 100-hour weeks and never see their families. And I thought, it doesn't matter how much you pay me. I do not want to do that job. I would make maybe 5% less and have a more fulfilling, well-rounded life. That seems like a better thing to me. So I learned a few things about statistics, but really I feel like it was the personal things about me that made that worthwhile.
I think I had the same epiphany when I was working in a different way. As I looked at promotions, I always noticed that people who got promoted might get 10 or 20% more money, but they were giving up a ton of time and a ton of freedom. And it's funny because at the first level of the promotion, you kind of went up, and then you literally had to take a step back and go into a whole nother role, and then you could start climbing again. And if you were one of the lucky who made it through, there was a payoff. But the opposite end of the payoff was you were going to drag your family all over the country. And so you were also going to deal with that. It's funny, at one point, one of my managers and I had the conversation, and he said, be careful what you wish for. Every single person I promoted has gotten divorced.
I feel like that was something that I didn't learn for a while too. That, I lived in California, Utah, Connecticut, Philadelphia, Boston, Portland, Washington in the last 20 years. And I did not fully appreciate the importance of having a community of people who I know their name and they know mine. And, my kids having some people who I trust that can be around and we can look to, and they can look to us. I feel like I missed that somewhere along the way, that we dangle this carrot in front of everybody, which is the top of the status hierarchy. And we are all kind of shooting for that top of the status hierarchy. And I just feel like there's so much more to life than being that small percentage at the top.
And I think that's very true. There is much more to life than just the money, especially if you give up all your life to have money. And some people, if that's what you want to do, that's great. But I probably wouldn't get married and have kids. I'd go get married to the company and go enjoy my life doing that instead of living my life another way. That's a choice you have to make.
Agreed. And I also feel like it's a trap if you're looking for the promotion and you feel like the promotion is the thing that is going to make me happy. And I noticed this in myself. I've been rising through the ranks of different organizations as I've traveled. And I feel that as soon as you reach that next tier, you have this moment where you feel good about it. And then you immediately change your sight to the next tier on the ladder. And you say, and it's just emptiness. Like it's much more empty than you think that it should be. But I feel like everyone around you looking at you, right, get that bump and that salary and that promotion, they look at you and they feel, wow, that person really has it all. When in actuality, this is not everything that I think people need to be happy.
And that's very, very true. People are always looking in the mirror saying, oh, that person has it all, but they haven't looked under the covers. And what they really haven't looked at is the price that you paid to have that and whether or not they want to pay that price, because in many cases it is extremely high. And you talked about that at the beginning with your father. He was gone all the time and that was the one thing you wanted. And again, I think you have to decide what you want out of life and ask yourself, is that it?
100%. Yes.
So you had a successful life, and at some point you came to the realization that something was missing. What happened?
It's true. I mean, it was right around the time of COVID. So kind of leading up to that, but it was before COVID too, where I feel like I had many of the things that the world told me I needed. I feel like I was successful in my career. I had a good education. I had a beautiful family with kids. I try to go to church every Sunday, like trying to do all the things, right? And I remember just looking in the mirror one day and thinking, is this really all there is? Like, is it all there is to my life that I'm going to go to meetings all day and then go home and watch TV until I fall, like for an hour or two until I fall asleep and then wake up early and start it over again? Is that what my life is all about? And so I started diving into what all of the research, as many books as I could find about what exactly makes life feel like it's worth living. Like, what does the research say? What does the theory say? And what really works from as many different perspectives as I could find.
So what did you find?
Well, the first thing that I discovered was people often talk about like needing to find purpose in life, and they talk about finding meaning in life. But what I discovered is that there's a difference between those two, and confusing them can get you in trouble in your life. So purpose first is having something to do and something to accomplish. Every day you need to wake up and have some mountain to climb, something to do. But then on the other side, you need to have meaning. And the way I think about meaning is you need to feel like your life matters, that you matter, and that you are valuable. And you don't just need one of those. You can't just have a purpose that underneath that purpose, I have something to do and accomplish, but it just feels empty, like it's not helping anything. You need to have the purpose and the meaning together to really have a fulfilling life.
So let's dig a little bit more into the meaning side, because it sounds like that is more important.
I think you're catching my bias in that. I don't knock purpose. I want it every day. I love having a job. I love going out and serving clients. But feeling like you matter is incredibly important. And I feel like it's what's missing in the world today, that more and more people are feeling like, I don't know what to do to feel like I matter. People are losing their friends. Their houses are getting bigger. They don't know their neighbors. They're having fewer kids. They're looking around thinking, what can I do to feel like I matter? And they don't know. That's how I felt.
It's funny because we could have bought a bigger house. And we didn't. Part of that is we love the neighborhood that we're in. As a matter of fact, I got a text today. It's springtime is coming. They're all going to be on the patio this weekend. And the neighbors all get together. We get together for holidays too. If you have family, great. You go with family. But if sometimes family's not around or whatever, the neighbors all just know each other. We've watched our kids grow up together. And I think there's a certain something to that, to being able to have those types of bonds. And I think that's the way it used to be, right? Well, I don't live in really small town America, but people used to do that much more. And I think there were much more bonds. And then it got broken apart. People go to all parts of the world and they don't even stay close to their parents. And so there isn't that tie to people or those relationships. And if you have no one to talk to, it becomes a struggle.
Absolutely. I mean, loneliness is a sickness. It's a kind of extreme pain. And I would think lack of meaning and loneliness kind of go along together in many ways.
So you wrote a book on the topic. What inspired you to write the book, A Worthwhile Life?
Well, I really think it was that moment of looking in the mirror and thinking, I need to figure this out. What are the mechanisms that make life feel worthwhile? And so I studied everything I could on the topic. And I'll say I look back on times in my life where I felt like I really mattered too. So I studied the topic deeply, and it became a blog post that got a lot of interaction and then started to grow and kind of took on this life of its own. And I feel like there's some new information in there, some new theory and some practical application that I felt like people needed to hear that could benefit others too.
So how do we find meaning in our life?
This is the thing that was a revelation for me. And I remember just waking up one morning with the 7 words on at the tip of my brain, and then honestly became the book. And I believe, and it's going to be a little jarring, but let's go with it for a moment, that meaning comes from taking a very specific kind of responsibility for another human being. And let me tell you what I mean. Let me tell you a story from my career. There's this woman. So I work in healthcare. I'm a healthcare executive, and in healthcare, we try to keep people from going to the emergency department too often. And this woman, she'd going to the emergency department like 6 or 7 times a year, and just over and over. And these are very expensive visits. I mean, a lot of out-of-pocket costs, and we're trying to cut the unnecessary, unnecessary spend for this individual. And so there's a care manager, this nurse who's dedicated to helping this person get better. And this nurse purchased for this woman a dog, and the dog's name was Moji. And because of this dog, the woman started going out on walks and her life started improving, and she stopped going to the emergency room. And when the nurse was telling me the story, the nurse said, I think it was just, this woman now had a reason to go on a walk, but I think it's much deeper than that. I think this woman didn't have anything to take care of, anyone or anything she was responsible for. And when she had that dog, she had a responsibility, someone to look out for. I think there's a good kind of responsibility and a bad kind of responsibility for another human being. And I think you could imagine the bad kind of responsibility, right? Like you want to take over someone's life and kind of force them to do what you want them to do. You kind of lead every aspect of how they should be. Or you're always inserting yourself into their lives. And then there's a good kind of responsibility where I think of it like a piano teacher, where you could learn the piano by yourself, but if you could become a piano teacher for another individual, help them learn the basic keys and inspire them and mentor them and help them along the way and give them negative feedback when they're not doing well, that taking that kind of responsibility for another human being can make your life better. And this is the crux of it. When you take responsibility for another human being and you say to yourself, I can help that individual, there's this part of your brain that gives meaning to your environment. It kind of assigns value to things around you. It makes sense of the world. When you take responsibility for another human being to help them, especially where they cannot help themselves, you can't do that without thinking that individual has some value. And if you can help that individual in some small way, even for a moment, then you must have value too. And so responsibility, I know I completely agree with taking responsibility for yourself, but if you can take the right kind of responsibility at the right level for individuals around you, that is the key to finding meaning in your life. Find that you matter, that they matter, that you are worthwhile.
Let's dig into that further. Before they do, quick step back, just because you're in the world of healthcare. Do you know who Patch Adams is?
Patch Adams, the nurse who would dress up in clown costumes and help kids who are in cancer care, that kind of thing. Yeah.
He was the doctor who kind of helped with depression and all of that.
Yes. Worked in hospitals.
Yes. Yeah. And it kind of comes back to what you're talking about, because half the reason people were showing up is because they were lonely. They didn't have purpose in their life. They didn't have meaning. And so going to the doctor or going to the ER is one way of getting people to acknowledge you.
Yes, that's an excellent point. And have somebody reach out to you and feel like you matter. Yeah, I think there's something about that reciprocal responsibility too. That you could take a responsibility for another human being, like think of a child, right, and help raise the child. I have some kids, or neighbors in my community. But I feel like there's another way to feel like you matter, and it's when somebody takes responsibility for you. Like there's that moment when your neighbor remembers your name and takes a moment to talk to you. I feel like that's the moment that you belong to a community. Or when you're in a company and your supervisor, you realize that your supervisor actually cares whether you live or die. Now, I have a great supervisor now, and I feel like that's when you belong to a company. Or it could be also your coworkers, right? That say, I care about, like, let's go out to lunch today. That's the moment you feel like you're a part of a company. And so this kind of mutually taking responsibility, I mean, we're social creatures, right? This is what makes humans so powerful. It's the taking responsibility. And I feel like the current generation is kind of moving away from the desire to look out for each other.
I was going to say, in the workplace, is that the normative that people care about each other?
I mean, I feel like it's hit or miss. Like it's been 50-50 in my career. Sometimes people are just looking out for themselves and aren't really interested in what's going on with you. But I find that the companies that I really want to work for, even if I'm getting paid a little less, are those where they care about me and I care about them and we're willing to help each other. Not that I'm willing to do someone else's job for them. That's not what I mean. It means that there are some things that I can do that other people aren't great at. And there are some things that, they can do that I'm not great at. And if we're willing to help each other in those gaps and kind of lift each other up and help each other progress, I mean, that's the company I want to work for.
Today's episode is sponsored by Profit Answer Man Podcast. Did you know that most small business owners hate looking at their financials? It's one reason they may struggle with business success. The Profit Answer Man podcast helps them ensure they are profitable and can pay their employees and weather the storms we all have to face. It's built on the Profit First methodology of pay yourself first. The Profit Answer Man podcast is a must listen to for every small business owner and anyone who wants to help them survive and thrive. Check it out on your favorite listening platform. And in order for that to happen, you need a company culture that fosters that. That just doesn't happen by accident. It's created, and as part of creating that, it's weeding out the people that don't fit the culture, making sure they don't even come into the ecosystem. And to build that, and that's not easy to build, to maintain, and to continue. When you can do that, yes. And as you said, I'd be willing to work for less. I think a lot of people feel that way. They just can't always find the opportunities or the places to be able to do that. And when they can, and when a company is that way, it definitely is more successful.
Absolutely. And when it's not that way, I feel like it becomes my responsibility to kind of create that culture with those around me. And then I feel like there's this tipping point where you get this core of people who really care about each other. And then if someone comes in, even if that's not naturally who they are, they can be influenced by the culture of the organization and feel like, maybe people will try to help me and I don't have to hide my bad work and, step on others and backtalk and do all those other things that might make their career, less enjoyable over time.
So kind of stepping back to a point you make earlier, it's about helping other people. What happens when you run into people who don't necessarily want help or won't accept help?
That's one of those age-old, one of those important questions too. So that I'm going to add on to yours, which is, should you just accept responsibility when people ask you for help and they need it, or should you take it? Where they don't really, they might not be looking for help, or they might not want to accept it. My experience is that it's great if you accept responsibility when people ask you for something that they can't do themselves. I would also say if someone asks you to do something that they can do themselves, they're fully capable, and you're being used, like that is not the kind of responsibility that's good. You should not be a puppet that will be led around to do anything that anyone ever wants for any reason, especially if it hurts you and that individual. But if you take responsibility, meaning there might be things that you can help them with that they don't even know they need help with. And there might be ways to help them where they don't even know that you're helping them, kind of subtly working in the background. I just find there's more opportunity to find meaning if you're looking for opportunities to take responsibility and help people, even if it's just for the moment that you're in front of them at a cocktail party.
That takes a certain type of talent to be able to know how to negotiate. Not negotiate is not the right word. Navigate that type of a scenario in being able to help people help themselves, to see their possibilities, but also to let them take ownership of doing it. Because if someone else does something for you, it's nice, but you can't be proud of that. You feel much more proud when you've done it for yourself, even if someone else has kind of opened the path for you.
Exactly. And that's why I like that piano teacher. You're not doing something for someone. That's taking away the opportunity from them. You're actually taking purpose away from them, like doing the thing that they should be doing. But if you can help them rise up by teaching them, by mentoring them, by giving them those skills to actually go and do it on their own, I mean, that's the goal. And if you look at a piano teacher, some students are hard to work with. They're not going to practice. They don't even want to be there. I mean, there's only so much you can do. And I think a big part of taking responsibility to help someone else is to not blame yourself if they don't step up, right? If you can't help them, if they don't want help and they reject your help, like you're willing to help. That's part of taking responsibility, but they are responsible for the end result. They're responsible for their own happiness and what course that they take. That's not me. It's the knowing somebody well enough and trying to align that with what you can do to try to help them in ways that they can't help themselves.
We don't take responsibility for other people. We can help them, but that doesn't mean we have to. Yeah. And I think that's a fine, tricky line that people sometimes get on the wrong side of. And you've got to learn to, again, it comes back to navigating.
Exactly. And that's why I think it's a jarring statement to say meaning is from taking responsibility for others. And you're like, well, no, they're responsible for their own lives. Like, absolutely, they're responsible for their own lives. You're responsible to just help them on their path for them to lead their own life and to help them with the tools. And if there's something they can't do, to help them with that thing and be open to allow them to help you too. Why humans are so successful. We have that space for 150 individuals. We can help each other. We can build things that no other species can because of that social connection and that ability. I would even take it so far as to say that the gaps that I have in my life, the things that I'm just incapable of doing or that I haven't learned yet or that I don't know, that those things are actually, in a way, a gift of meaning to someone around me. Like, you can imagine a situation where everyone were perfect in every single way and had every single amount of knowledge and could do every little thing, that we would have no need to be social at all. We wouldn't need to ask anyone for help. We would have everything solved just in our own little sphere. But it's my gaps that are the opportunity for someone to find meaning. And it's their gaps where I can help them along their journey, where I can feel like I matter. And I feel like anyone with a child or a houseplant or a pet or anything that you can nurture, you can not just feel like you matter, but actually make a difference in someone's life.
And it's funny how it can just be simple things, as you said, like a pet or a houseplant. You can always find your way forward. It doesn't have to be as complicated as I think we try to make it.
Exactly. And people tend to think about finding like you matter, that in order to really feel like you matter, what you do has to exist for eons. Like after the world, the universe dies, that, the thing that I did will still be echoing throughout the eternities. And I just think that's too high of a bar, honestly. I feel like, on my runs, there's a beautiful grass valley near my home. I'll run and I'll be running by someone and I'll see someone and they'll smile at me and I'll smile back at them and I'll feel like that person cared enough to smile. I must matter a little. It's just for a moment. And then that person's gone. I don't have any more, no responsibility or to help them. They're out of my life. I'm out of theirs. But for that moment, I matter.
So how does this all relate to happiness?
Happiness. So happiness is one of those concepts that I've been, throughout my life, I'll find a definition of happiness. Like someone will explain flow state, like where you're in the moment and you're doing something that you really care about. And it's the Goldilocks level of difficulty where it's not too hard and it's not too easy. You have this moment of flow where you're completely immersed in a thing. And I think that's the definition of happiness. And then someone will come to me and say, no, happiness is really affect balance. It's the number of it's the amount of positive and emotional states and negative emotional states. And the more positive emotional states relative to the negative, the happier you are. Or someone will say it's an evaluation of your entire life as a whole. And if you've lived a great life if you think you've lived a great life, then you deem yourself happy. Or maybe you say it's cheerfulness, where it's that outward expression of happiness. And, the definitions kind of go on, right? And what I realize is that happiness is not, the word happiness isn't one thing. It's many things. It could be pleasure, right? Like having a lot of pleasure, like a well-being. And I could just keep going down. I'd come up with 15 or 16 definitions of happiness. And meaning is definitely one of those, feeling like I matter, that I am worthwhile. I think that is a good definition of meaning. There's some religious definitions that I think are worthwhile. But instead of thinking about happiness as one thing, I break it out in all my component parts. And I do this in the book. I kind of list all the definitions and create what's called a happiness hierarchy, where you take the definitions of happiness and you say, what is the brand of happiness that I want in my life? Like what matters the most to me? Is it pleasure? Do I want flow states? Do I want absence of pain? Do I want that affect balance, like the number of positive emotions compared to the negative? What kind of happiness do I really want? And I don't know about you. I think other people kind of can define this however they want. But for me, I wanted to have meaning. I wanted to feel like I mattered. So, I'm a believer also. I feel like I wanted to have having a connection with God, and that matters to me. Evaluating my life entirely and saying like, I have a good life. Those are kind of like my top three, at least they are today in this moment. And I realized that I could have a lot of pain and actually consider myself happy if that's the way I want to define my happiness hierarchy. And I don't knock the pleasure. I love pleasure. Like when that butterfly lands on my shoulder, I am excited. Welcome. I accept all the different kinds of happiness. Flow states, incredible. I fight for that every day, exercising, that kind of thing. But for me, the kind of happiness I really want in my life could coexist with some pain.
And I think the most important is for people to define what it is for them. Because too often we're taking someone else's definition, and then we wonder why we're not happy.
Exactly. Yeah. Or I think that people actually do this kind of subconsciously, where they're thinking about happiness in one way and they're actually pursuing that brand of happiness. And let's say if it was just all pleasure, 100%, that's how you define happiness, you're going to act very differently than if you were, chasing meaning, or if you were chasing purpose, or if you're chasing, life, some life evaluation.
And that's true. Living, I guess it all depends, but living a life of, I don't know if pleasure is the right word, but I consider it like people who've had financial success decide they want to retire and go sit on a beach all day and be happy. In some senses it's pleasure, but I find most people within a period of time find a lack of, meaning and purpose in that, right? They have nothing to live for, and it's fun for a couple of days, but after a while it gets very boring and you got to do something different.
Yeah. It's true. I've actually studied that retirement step. And when people sell their companies, they describe a kind of depression. Like they should be they're getting this giant financial windfall, but they feel like they've lost this sense of like something to do and to accomplish, and this thing that gave them meaning. There are all these people and customers that they were taking care of, and coworkers and products they were developing that gave them purpose, and they kind of lose that. Luckily, there's also a lot of research saying that if you lose one source of meaning, you can there are other ways that you can build it as your, kids graduate and move out of the home, or when people close to you pass away. There's a lot that you can do to still recapture that meaning in your life.
I say you have to retire to something. If you don't have something to retire to, then yeah, you're going to go downhill pretty fast because there's no meaning and purpose in your life or anything to do.
Yeah. I watched this video one time of this surfer. I love surfing. It's one of my passions. I don't do it as much as I used to when I was young, but so I read this story about the surfer who everything was closing because of COVID. And he got on one of the last planes to this remote island with some of the best surfing in the world. And he and his friend were the only person on the island. And it was just supposed to be a week, but then with lockdown, it became 3 months with the best surfing in the world. And he thought, this is my purpose. I'm going to become the greatest surfer. I'm going to be so happy. This is going to be amazing. And by the end of the 3 months, he was miserable. There was only so much pleasure that he could take and so many perfect waves that he could handle before he was looking for anything else that he could do. He said he woke up one morning and, there was a reverse fryer where the top of his head was shaved, and he was miserable. He didn't even know how that happened in the middle of the night, and he didn't care and didn't do anything about it. He was just like, there was only so much pleasure he could take.
It's funny. Be careful what you wish for. You might just get it. You've kind of talked a little bit about this, but how does spirituality fit into all of this?
Yeah. So I think one of those questions that I think religions need to do a better job of answering is, why do people find so much meaning in religion? Or you could say spirituality, or however you want to describe it. Let's say spirituality. And I find that religion and spirituality are they're meaning generators. I feel like that's what they do more than anything else. And when I look at the data, people commonly name family is the biggest generator of meaning. And you can see that's where you have the most responsibility. Number 2, and it's kind of a distant second, is spirituality and religion. And the reason based on my research and what I believe on this one, is that when people feel like they are taking responsibility and have a connection with God, like they're going to help God's work, and they feel like that connection, that God cares about them, they feel meaning in that moment. When it comes to spirituality, they tend to form communities where people look out for each other. They also tend to look out to the external world. And it could be through, you could call it missionary work or kind of service or volunteer work. They tend to have an emphasis on that. They tend to teach things that tend to provide meaning, like family and hard work and participation in the community. They also, religious and spiritual people tend to often have rituals that bind themselves symbolically, not just to God, but to other people around them. That can be a huge source of meaning. And it's also just an opportunity where it's not just you taking responsibility for others, but you feel them taking responsibility for you. So, religion and spirituality is absolutely a meaning generating machine.
It creates a framework in which to find all of this. Mm-hmm. And again, it goes back thousands of years. And as you look at all the different religions, they have a lot of crossover in how they do it. In same concepts, different words, different ways, but the same underlying purpose. And at the end of the day, I think it makes you feel wanted and purposeful. So that, and have meaning to life, right? That's the question everyone asks. How do I find meaning in my life? Which is where we started. Is there anything else on this topic that we should have talked about but didn't get a chance to? Maybe
just one thing that's at the tip of my brain that I'm just finding fascinating today is that there's a lot of research around cultures that find their lives meaningful. Like if you look at by nation, what percentage of the people find life meaningful? It's fascinating that the wealthy cultures, there's a much lower percentage of the population that finds their lives meaningful. And it's the poor nations that tend to find where it's virtually 100% of the folks will say, I have meaning and purpose. And you can think about individuals in some of those poor nations where they can see that they matter. You know, like the people around them kind of depend on them for survival. And you can see how the relationship, the connection between that. And also it's really interesting to me that we tend to pursue comfort and well-being in our Western cultures where, you know, with the latest gadgets and, you know, the latest entertainments and theme parks and that kind of thing, and taking time off and the perfect vacations. And those things absolutely will help us with our comfort. But part of me wonders if we're spending too much emphasis on finding comfort when we should be focusing more on programs and other things that will give us meaning. If you look over time, everything that we're doing in our society, it's not hard to find, by the way, but we are working fewer hours all of the time. Houses are huge, neighbors, families getting smaller, marriage happening later. We are just moving away from those responsibilities and we're adding more comforts. And those comforts are giving us kind of, you could say, well-being or happiness, but they may not be giving us meaning.
And I was in India earlier this year, and as I walked around, the one thing that I noticed is that the people who had very little, or even the people who were working in service areas, they all were happy. They all at least seemed happy and content. Now, I'm not going to say the whole place is happy. It's not. But it just seemed like, in general, people were more content in the work that they were doing, whether it was being a waiter or the doorman or the person sweeping the street. You know, It was just interesting to watch.
And as we have these brilliant AI models, the artificial intelligence models that are going to be taking over more and more of our jobs, these brilliant robots, which I'm excited about in many ways, I hope that we can still find ways to, you know, make our lives worthwhile, that we can still make a contribution and be of use.
I definitely think there will be. It just changes. Yes. And I think so. It goes back to what you talked about, right? About statistics in school. You just kind of coasted through statistics until you realized it mattered. AI is going to force people who are coasting through life and not providing much value to have to step up and figure out how to do things differently or bring more value, because AI will do the mundane, boring stuff.
Agreed. And I think that's something worth fighting for, to find out what your contribution is. How can you make the world a better place, even while it changes?
So let's just kind of change subjects a little bit. You're in the healthcare world. What are you seeing happening kind of throughout the United States in the world of healthcare?
I think healthcare is first and foremost a business. We could do a whole hour on healthcare and what works about it, what doesn't. I think that we kind of assume that healthcare is like the one righteous industry, you know, where everybody is looking out for the benefit of the patient and trying to make life good. But healthcare is absolutely a business. I think that it does a lot of good, and I think that it could do a lot more good. I think that there are too many hands in I think there are too many people who want to get paid for every healthcare service. We have, you know, the government has their hand in it. We have insurance companies. We have healthcare providers and multiple of them, administrative folks, medical device. Everybody is getting paid. I think the way we're doing healthcare is a problem that we can do better at.
And I don't know that we can solve that.
Not in the next few minutes, but I think it's a fantastic topic, and there's a lot that we can do.
Well, and I think it comes back to finding meaning too, in the sense of it isn't just about the money, which is what I think healthcare in many cases have turned into, in that there is less caring and less helping and more just having to do what you're told or following whatever systems or being constrained by having to deal with the money factors.
Yeah. And I think at an individual level, if most providers are trying to do the right thing and they love their patients, and nurses and administrators, they're trying to do the right things. But the way we have incentives right now incentivizes all the wrong kinds of behavior. And that impacts the world when you look at it in aggregate.
And I concur with you. It's time to learn the secrets of life. What's your secret to living an abundant life?
My secret to living an abundant life, and this is counterintuitive to me, and it's taken my entire life and I'm still learning. But my secret is that to try to not take things that don't belong to me, number one. I feel like that's the tier that I'm working on. And that means like no stealing, no lying, like trying to create false perceptions of reality for folks, to not take things that don't matter for me. That's level one. And level two is to try to give away as much of the things that matter to me to others as I possibly can. I feel like the more I give away, there are many things I'm not great at, but those few things that I am okay at, the more I give away, the more I feel like my life is abundant. The more I can look at people in the eye and just see that I made a difference, and then I get gratitude from them, and I feel like I matter in those moments. And I feel like that's the kind of abundance that I want and have.
That makes a lot of sense and very much in alignment with what we talked about today.
Yes.
What did you learn later in life that you wish you would have learned sooner?
Later in life, we talked about establishing yourself and your family in a community. That I didn't learn for a while. I think that one very important thing I learned later in life is to just not go after the rat race so much, to look at what you have instead of looking at the rat race. I feel like that is it's the siren song of the competent. Like competent people are kind of sucked into the rat race, and people, they feel like they can get to the top, and there they'll really make a contribution when they're at the top. And I feel like I was just lulled into that. And really what I should have been thinking about is, how can I gain the skills necessary to make a contribution to the world that matters? And what can I do to help people around me right now?
And we're all put on that rat race. This is the secret to life and the secret to success. And then you get it and you're like, I got lied to.
This is it? Yeah.
This is it, right?
Being an executive? Yeah.
Yeah. Uh-huh. If you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
I would say, find somewhere that you can take responsibility. Where our younger generation, I think, is really struggling is that we're not giving them enough. We're not putting enough on their shoulders, and they can feel that. They're kind of wading through life without much to do and not feeling like they're very useful. So I would say, look out there, and it might not be how you can be helpful now, but look at ways that you can become a contributing member of society. I would say, take a deep look at yourself and say, how can I take responsibility? Not just for myself, but for someone around me.
And I think that is very true. We do not give kids agency anymore. As a matter of fact, I think they have less choices and less freedom than they ever have. They're not allowed to go out and play and have fun like they used to be able to do. And
yeah.
I think a lot of that comes back to why many of them have the issues that they do today, but little by little.
Yeah, and there are good reasons for it. I mean, sometimes people, I understand we don't all get married when we're 14 anymore, or the women don't anymore, and the men are 18. There are fantastic reasons for that I'm behind for my own girls. But on the other side of that, the people that did get married and have kids younger, they did have that responsibility, and they were of use, and they were contributing. And so I feel like we're starting to err on the side of being too cautious when it comes to responsibility and turning, boys into men and girls into women.
They're spending too much time chasing the corner office.
Exactly.
If people would like to learn more about you and the book, what's the best place for them to do that?
I have a website called echoesofmeaning.com, and they could check out my book at Amazon or anywhere. It's called A Worthwhile Life is my book. They can check that out on Amazon or anywhere else books are sold.
Awesome. And we'll put that in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Rocky.
Do you feel like you have meaning in your life? We talk a lot about having purpose. And to me, that purpose includes meaning. We can parse words, and sometimes there's no all-encompassing word that best reflects this. It's just one piece of the total puzzle to live the life you're grateful for. Is there something you can do differently that would move you closer to achieving this? The one thing I realized looking back at my life is the few intentional decisions I made to live on my terms in different areas and the choices that we made. We had to build on those, though. We had to build relationships with our neighbors, put the time in with our kids, doing what they loved, making choices on work-life balance and building wealth and all of that. When I did it looking forward, it was all a little like, will this work out? Looking back, it's paid off massively. I hope you can find some nuggets today to help you move forward in your life. By the way, if you enjoyed today's show and you know someone else who would you mind sharing it with them? And wherever you normally share podcasts as well. I'd appreciate that. Next week, we've got on Jason Skisick. We're going to talk about achieving big, hairy goals. I know you're going to love it. Thanks for listening. Have an abundant week.